Hi and hello, watch fans, and welcome to the second part of our Audicle analysis addressing the questions raised to David's trained chatbot, who still doesn't have a name, so please do get in contact with us with your suggestions so we can christen them and make them a fully fledged member of the Real-Time Show team. Last episode, we left you on a cliffhanger with David reading out some of the more interesting responses the chatbot gave regarding Rolex's recent acquisition of Bucherer and what it could mean for the future of both brands, or all of them if you include Tudor and Karl F. Bucherer, the watch brand, in that cachet as well. What we're going to do now is David is going to take us through each of those points individually. We'll address it each in turn, and then we'll move on to some of the crazier stuff at the end of the Audicle analysis. If you have not listened to last week's episode, go back not just to last week, but to the week before and listen to the Audicle itself, and then come around again to last week's part one, and then listen to this one, and you will have the full story in your ears. David, take it away.
Rob, you were very cruel at how you ended the last episode, but that's okay. Hopefully everyone came back for the second part, and I am ready to get crazy today, but not too crazy, because these are the predictions that, unlike some of the wilder stuff you heard last week, I think there might be some truth to them. And I think this is where the AI stuff becomes really, really interesting, because it makes you think of things that you would not have thought of before. So what I suggest is that I just jump right into the wild but not impossible suggestions. There are 10 of them. And I'll break it into, say, like chunks of, let's go with chunks of 3. So let's do 3, discuss them, and move to the end of them. Does that work for you both?
It definitely does, David. Good idea.
Okay. All right. So you're not going to have to wait long for stuff to get really wild, because number 1 is increased availability at authorized dealers. Now, I'm going to read the paragraph that the chatbot says. In a surprising shift, Rolex could decide to increase the availability of their watches at authorized dealers. This would counter the current trend where many popular models are nearly impossible to find. This change could be driven by a desire to regain control over the market and reduce dependence on the gray market. It's a move that would delight many customers. So, okay, that makes sense. It shows good understanding of what the current state of the market is. But now let's get to the crazy stuff. Number 2, Rolex launching exclusive Bucherer editions. Following the acquisition of Bucherer, Rolex might introduce exclusive Bucherer editions of their most popular models. These editions could feature unique design elements or special engravings, available only through Bucherer boutiques. This would create a new level of exclusivity and draw customers directly to Bucherer stores. This is my comment before I go to number 3. It's interesting. It talks about increasing supply with another measure that would just drive people nuts. So there you go. Number 3, Rolex introducing a direct-to-consumer model through Bucherer. Now this does, and Alan, I think your thoughts are going to be super interesting, because this is a different retail model than what they have currently, at least as I understand it. Rolex could leverage Bucherer's retail network to pilot a direct-to-consumer or a DTC sales model. This would be a significant departure from their traditional sales approach and could offer a more controlled distribution, allowing Rolex to manage supply and demand more effectively. Okay, Rob, Alan, what do you guys think?
Let me jump in. So the first 3. 1 is not that crazy or weird, because it's going to happen. Why? Rolex is building a new factory. They're employing 6,000 extra people. Rumors are out there, floating out there, that they're going to increase production by 20-30%. So if the hypothesis of 1 million watches being produced take a bit more or off, that's going to be 1.3 million. So number 1 is not that crazy. So well done, chatbot. 2, neither that crazy. Bucherer was not the first, but went big on their Bucherer editions. Everything has something blue in it and a dial or a watch combination that was not done by the brands. And they've done more than a dozen already, of which one is the Tudor Bucherer edition. Bronze case, 41 millimeter case, blue dial, blue bezel. So not that weird either. And talking about number 3, Rolex introducing DTC model, not that strange either. I mean, you can already find prices of Rolex watches on their website. The only thing missing is a buy button. Obviously, Bucher is transactional on their .com. The only brand probably they're not selling there is Rolex. If Rolex is going to flip that switch, and I don't think the question is if, it's more when, whom else to try it first with, than their number one retailer in the world, Bucher. I think they would have done it with Bucher even if they wouldn't have bought it. Why? Their CPO program, their Certified Pre-Owned program, who was the first to launch it in the world? Bucher. So, again, ChatBot, well done.
Rob, what do you think about a potential Bucher edition of a Rolex watch? Do you think it's possible? Would it drive the people nuts?
I think both. I think, yes, it absolutely is possible. I think it would be incredible. And I think that it would align with Rolex's strategy, actually. You know, it's not something the brand has ever done before, or at least not to my immediate knowledge. Now, Alon, perhaps you have a better handle on this. Rolex special editions in the past, obviously we've seen co-signed dials that we talked about at length before, so I suppose that's something. But an entire model, has that ever happened? Like I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm saying that Bucher would release like a Datejust 2 or 3 or whatever. I'm not saying that it would have to be a new piece. I mean, like something that is so different.
Think about it. The Eastern Arabic numbers on the day dates and whatever, I believe are Siddiqui exclusives.
Are they? Is that true?
That's what I think. So if you think about it, those, I'm not talking about the watches they made for Domino's, right?
Right.
I believe there are 3 different ones. And I'm not talking about the Comex subs or Sea Dwellers. And I'm not talking about our dear friend Asher and Gabe, initiated with Tudor for Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
But that's Tudor.
Pan Am Rolexes, and there was Air Force Rolexes. There's loads of those. But like the Siddiqui Arabic numeraled watches, that's the closest to what I'm kind of conceiving here. It's basically not just a dial printing, it's a material design difference. So that would be cool, right?
That would be definitely cool. And I believe it will happen.
Yeah, I have to put my cards on the table and say the same.
Okay.
I think it's happening.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So moving, that was number 3. Let's go through 4, 5, 6. And again, juicier and juicy here. Number 4, bespoke Rolex services through Bucher. So I'm going to read the paragraph. Rolex might introduce bespoke or customization services exclusively through Bucher. This could range from personalized engravings to selecting unique dial colors or bracelet options. While Rolex has historically been resistant to customization, offering it through a controlled channel like Bucher might be a way to test the waters. Yeah, I think it's a really well-worded paragraph, but number 5 first. Rolex expanding their product line exclusively in Bucher stores. Rolex could expand their product line with new models or variations exclusively available at Bucher stores. This would drive traffic to Bucher and create a unique shopping experience for Rolex enthusiasts. Number 6, special after-sales services or loyalty programs. With the acquisition, Rolex might offer special after-sales services or loyalty programs through Bucher, like extended warranties, first access to models, or invitation-only events. This would enhance the value proposition of purchasing from an AD.
Where do we start? I mean, let's go backwards through them. I know the freshest in my mind. Yeah, I think that they now have a physical space in addition to their already extensive authorized dealer network that, because of its multi-brand status and historical relevance to the communities in which Buchers tend to be based, it's a totally different target market, a totally different audience of people that you can pull into these evening events or special launches or anything along those lines. I think it would be mad not to utilize that facility. I mean, the company has grown, it's overnight added so many established locations. That's the important thing. It's not like Rolex has bought real estate and is about to open 70 new boutiques. There will be people that have been shopping at these local Buchers for generations. It'll be part of their family's fabric. So that, to me, is why it's so striking. And no comment from Rolex about rebranding the stores. It would be a travesty to do so. So I say, yeah, that last point is definitely going to happen. Alon, respond to that. And then David, could you just read each individual one backwards, and then we'll respond to each one so we can keep that question fresh in our minds.
Expanding the product line exclusively, I guess they'll do it in the line of thought that we just did with these Eastern Arabic numbers that they did for Siddiqui. That will happen, I'm quite sure. Now, extra after sales services, loyalty programs, I think it will happen. Rolex was the first brand, if I'm not mistaken, in the high-end Swiss watchmaking industry to jack up their warranty from 2 years to 5, and then everybody followed their suit. So, not unlikely. I believe it will happen. Very likely. And why would they be inclined to do that? They hate flippers. So, by creating this warranty program, this loyalty program, which, by the way, our dear ChatBot didn't invent or hallucinate, he or she or it copied it from Richemont. Richemont launched, I believe, 2 years ago, all over the board, standard 2 years warranty on their products, all the Richemont brands. If you register online with the particular brand and register your product, they extend your warranty by 6 years. So you walk out the door, scan a QR code, bam, give a bit of privacy away. And with the, or privacy, as you say in English, you get 6 years extra, 8 years in total. So our chatbot did not make this up, but looked at maybe one of the biggest competitors for Rolex. Very much likely to happen, in my humble opinion.
Bespoke Rolex services through Bucherer. Super interesting here. Rolex might introduce bespoke or customization services exclusively through Bucherer. This could range from personalized engravings to selecting unique dial colors or bracelet options. And this is why I think this paragraph is well written, because there is nuance, and this is the justification. So I'm quoting now again. While Rolex has historically been resistant to customization, offering it through a controlled channel like Bucherer might be a way to test the waters. What do you both think?
I love this, and I think that it echoes what IWC tried to do with one of their Portuguese models a year or two back. If you remember, I think they had maybe 15 or 20 combinations of watches that were available to be bought in store from only selected retailers. And I agree. I think it's a good way to test the market without completely upending the brand. You have to still control the offering. I mean, Rolex tries to do this. They try to offer the perception of customization with their configurator, even though you're completely hamstrung by it and you can only pick models that they have deemed to be worthy of the Rolex catalog. I don't think that Rolex would ever do something too wild here, like maybe making an existing but harder to come by component available for a customizer would be palatable. So let's take the jigsaw dial, for example. Like you could maybe say, okay, this exists, but only in something very, very rare and special. But with this configurator, it can be had in other combinations, like a steel case, for example, or a steel and white gold case, or even a bicolor case, if they prefer. That might be interesting. I can't get my head around ever allowing the customer to choose anything that hasn't been firmly ratified by the crown, if you know what I mean. So it's more like maybe the term really is personalization rather than customization, or it probably applies better one way round than the other. But I think having a selection of options that are exclusive to Bucherer that could be available, maybe even something as simple as like an existing bracelet that wouldn't normally be available on a certain model, but wouldn't therefore disrupt the whole Rolex catalog, like when they released the Batman and you could only get it on the Oyster bracelet for a couple of years until the Batgirl followed on the Jubilee. So you could do that, like, because I'm sure Rolex will bring back the Coke at some point. I'm desperate for them to. It's the model I want. And when they do, if they adhere to the old Coke, I think the old Coke was always, or at least almost always, on an Oyster bracelet. I'd love to see that available on a Jubilee, and that could be something that they offer exclusively in Bucherer.
Great example by IWC. The funny thing is I visited the new IWC boutique in Amsterdam last week. My friends work there, and actually an ex-Team Ace member as well. So they invited me. I went to have a look. Apparently, it's the biggest IWC boutique in the world. And I didn't notice this particular collection of the customized Portuguesers. But what was cool, they had a machine there to stamp your initials, hot stamping in your leather straps. So I thought that was cool. But if you think about it, Rolex was maybe one of the first brands that offered from almost day one the biggest program of customization options. I mean, up until a few years ago, you could buy multiple dials while you buy a new watch or straps. Because if you look at the referencing system by Rolex, and I'm winking back at one of our previous episodes, mailbag episodes where we discuss reference numbers, the Rolex watches give a reference just basically to the head. So the case and material execution, but they don't talk so much about the dial option, because usually you'll have, back in the days, 4 digits, then 5 digits. Today it's 6 digits for a watch. And then they add a dash and then 4 or 5 extra numbers, and that will tell you the dial execution. But they don't speak about the strap. And let's take the GMT, for example. You could choose an Oyster. You can choose a Jubilee. They've added rubber recently to some of the models, not all, but some. And they're more difficult now on buying extra dials. I believe you have to wait 3 years. And I'm not sure they actually give you the dial. They want you to come back to the same watchmaker because they're scared these dials get lost in, let's call it, in hyphens, replica watches. So actually not a bad idea by their chatbot.
Okay, so we're actually batting pretty strongly here. Let's see what you both have to say about the last 4. So if you've been keeping score, 3, 3, 6, we got 10. There's 4 left, but I think that's okay because number 7 to me isn't that interesting. But let's see what you both think. So Bucher is a platform for vintage and pre-owned Rolex watches. I don't really want to read this paragraph because, as we know, Rolex basically announced this was another big story from them that they would enter the pre-owned market. I think Bucher, when I checked the website, they do seem to have Rolex pre-owned. So I don't quite know that this is as kind of in the theme of the episode for out there predictions. So I'm going to brush over that one, but 8, 9, and 10 make up for that. So number 8 is interactive Rolex exhibits or museums within Bucher stores. Rolex could establish interactive exhibits or mini museums within select Bucher stores, showcasing the brand's history and craftsmanship. This would not only be a draw for customers, but also serve as an educational and brand building tool. Number 9, this is where it gets interesting. Limited production runs for collector's editions. In a rare move, Rolex could release limited production runs of certain models specifically for Bucher, catering to collectors and connoisseurs looking for something unique. Finally, number 10, exclusive online access to Rolex inventory through Bucher. Rolex might provide exclusive online access to their inventory through Bucher's digital platforms. Customers could view available models in boutiques and reserve them online, blending the convenience of digital browsing with the assurance of purchasing from an AD. Rob, Alon, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the vintage at all myself. I think Rolex should handle that through their own ADs because you don't want Bucher to be doing too much of the novel motions Rolex could now implement with it. You don't want it to be seen as just a sandbox where they just try everything, because it devalues the seriousness of Bucher and the strategies that should be implemented through an existing esteemed retailer like that. So for me, I think the vintage and pre-owned is something that Rolex can very much handle in store in their own authorized dealers, in their monobrand stores, of course. I mean, I think that that is something they should take control of, but I don't think it's something that Bucher really needs to be used for. I think it's legitimate without Bucher. The interactive Rolex exhibits or museums, likewise, look, this could be anywhere. You could do this in the AD. What I'm looking at is, what does Bucher enable Rolex to do that it couldn't do before? What does it enable Rolex to do more effectively than it could do through its own AD? There's nothing, apart from maybe the space it would take from existing Rolex ADs, which don't tend to be as large as existing Bucharest stores, that would be offered by that. Now, could you do that on the second floor, for example? Yeah, maybe you could, because they have many Bucharest stores that are multi-floors. David, do you want to jump in here?
No, only, this was interesting to me because it goes back to a point that was mentioned in the first part of this series. And Alan, I'm sure you can speak to this as well, but it's the consistency of the retail experience. Because as I understand Rolex's model now, you can, I think that there is a standard kind of look and feel for all the stores, but is there a look and feel for customer experience overall? And so what I'm thinking here is that this would be kind of an opening salvo in Rolex really saying, okay, we've got the production of watches standardized and down to a science. Can we take that to the very, very end and make the customer experience uniform and unforgettable all the way to the sale, basically?
Well, yeah, I think you can, right? And that's kind of what I'm saying. I would say that you want to focus on the experience of the Rolex customer, the Rolex authorized dealer customer, and the Rolex customer via Bucharest as two different experiences that need to be fully realized independently from one another. I don't think that you need to make the customer experience at Rolex authorized dealers static. I don't think that needs to perpetuate and you just do all the new stuff with Bucharest. In fact, the opposite would be better, I think, to split your new ideas into each channel as and where they fit the best. And for me, what's the problem with having like a secret door in a Rolex AD? They often have rooms in the back where you go and like look at many watches at once in a high security setting. You could easily transform one of those into a small museum. So what's the advantage of doing that in Bucharest other than space, like I say? Or what's the disadvantage of doing it in Rolex? What do you think, David?
Yeah, I mean, logistically, when you raise those points, it's something to think about. I suppose in my mind, it's really okay. So let's assume that we take as a given things like customization or Bucharest editions of Rolex watches. It just seems to me like they're already going to be special. I mean, people would go nuts over them, but you could have sort of a display explaining what this is, or some kind of display that leads into the customization. So it's more just providing more to the customer, not just saying, here's a special edition watch, you can buy this, but like, this is a special thing and here's why, and let's put you in the universe of Rolex and Bucharest. So I'm sorry, before I let you respond to that, I just had one thing jump into my mind. You know how like Hard Rock Cafe, if that's still a thing, there's t-shirts for different locations around the world. I'm presuming that each Bucharest store around the world has maybe a different, something that's a little bit different about it. So if you had like a Paris Bucharest edition, it would be different from a Swiss Bucharest edition. And you could use those displays to reinforce that.
I adore that idea. I love it. I really, really would encourage Rolex to take that to the nth degree. It could even be something as simple as a dial printing, a co-signed dial, Bucharest edition, and then Paris. And you could just make the same concept so collectible. You could have a different color for each town, or you could keep it as straight lined as you wanted and just have slightly different text on the dial. I get that. I maintain that the idea that ChatBot has raised here is good to have these Rolex exhibits. In fact, I went to the exhibit about the Daytona and a small museum presentation in Dubai just a couple of weeks ago, put on by Rolex, and it was a nice little film. It was a good space. It was on brand. I could see that being deployed in Rolex authorized dealers already. Could I see it also in Bucharest? Yeah, I could. But I guess what I want them to do with Bucharest is much more ambitious than just better displays and more interactive. And I think that if you have the customization in Bucharest, that's its own thing. That's not really about the history of Rolex as much as you could make those interactive exhibits be. So the next point was the limited production runs for collector's editions. Yeah, we've touched on this many times. Of course, this is the thing we hope that they do. We hope that there's a collectible series of Bucharest. I really do think that your idea, David, like Hard Rock Cafe, is perfect. They should do that. It would be wonderful. People would go nuts for it. Having to travel to a physical store to buy a watch is something I firmly advocate. I think it's great. I lament the fact that Swatch doesn't do airport editions for every airport in the world, because I would buy them all. As it is now, I don't buy any of them when they do them, because it's not a collection that really would mean that much to me. If I could mark every airport I've been with a Swatch, I'd be a happy man. And then lastly, you asked in this barrage, exclusive online access to Rolex inventory through Bucherer. Now that is interesting. Whew. Yeah, it is the big one. Yeah, you're right, because it would make sense, because now Rolex has to not just look at its own strategy, but also the strategy of the brands that are also sold by its newly acquired retailer. And so would you be able to buy, I don't know, a Karl F. Bucherer online, but not a Rolex? Would Rolex perennially be sold out? Would Rolex be in-store only? Could Rolex counter the annoyance of that by releasing these special store editions and increasing Bucherer's complement even to exceed that of Rolex's own stores, for example, or at least to match it one for one? I don't know. Tough one. Let me think about that. Would it devalue Rolex? Would it take too many sales away from Rolex as an AD? How much stock would Rolex really have online? Would it reveal too much about Rolex's stock numbers, the speed at which they sold out and remained sold out online? Would we be able to glean something from it that Rolex wouldn't want us to glean? Maybe you can answer some of those questions in response to that point.
I'd like to get Alan's point of view, because I mean, I know you were one of the first to do online watch retailing in the Netherlands, right, Alan? So I mean, what was your sort of thought process back then, and how might that be different in 2023 or 2024 in this case?
So we were indeed the first to be authorized by many brands back in 2007 to sell online. And the first one to have that vision and act upon it was George Kern, back in the day, CEO of IWC. And then all the others followed that we were authorized dealers of. So back then, the biggest problem was e-com is not chic. So they were opposed, and it undermined exclusivity in their minds. A lot has changed in these 15, 16 years. But today, there are only two brands in the high-end watchmaking, if I'm not mistaken, which are Rolex and Patek, that do not offer a buy button on their own website for new products, or don't let their ADs do it. Up until last year, Tudor didn't allow it either, but that changed. They let their ADs sell on their own respective websites. So looking at the 10th idea by ChatBot, that I don't think is going to happen, because if you think about it, what makes Rolex so wanted is that demand surpasses supply. And by streamlining demand and supply, what will happen? The desirability and prices, aftermarket prices, will come down. And that's not in Rolex's benefit, is it? So I do not see this happening in the coming decade.
Interesting. I still think, going back to the chatbot generation of it, I think the interesting part here is that it's not so crazy. I completely understand your reasoning, Alan, but this is one of those where it's like maybe crazy because it doesn't understand Rolex, but it's also not so crazy that there's not at least a 0.5% chance that it couldn't happen.
It's not crazy at all. You're 100% right. It will happen. Probably not the next decade. Taking a parallel or segue to Patek Philippe's CEO Stern has said, I don't want to do direct to consumer, although they have 2 boutiques in the world. I don't want to do e-commerce. But I can't predict what's happening in the next 2 decades. If I don't have the best retailers in the world anymore, which he states today I have the best retailers in the world, then I'm forced to go to a D2C model, including e-commerce. But if it's up to me, I don't want to. And that was his statement. But world is changing at such a rapid pace, we have no idea what's going to happen in the coming next 3 years, let alone next 2 decades. So it's indeed not that strange.
Rob, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I have. Well, it's a very tangential point, maybe picked up from Patek Philippe. What about margins, right? So if you only have retailers, like third-party retailers, so multi-brand retailers, you don't have your own stores, and you don't have online, your margin game is completely different from everybody else in the industry. And if you do sell with third-party retailers, then obviously the watches that you sell yourself directly to people coming into your store come at a much higher margin for you. So you make more to sell them directly, theoretically. My wonder is how that's going to work for Patek Philippe in the long term, because ultimately they will have to shift. If you were to drop all of your retailers and go online and your pricing stayed the same, would it have a relatively negative reputational effect on people from on the outside looking in, or do people just not understand enough about how those dynamics work for it to be an issue?
Yeah, Alan, I'm definitely have to defer to you on your retail expertise there.
So the best example is one of the modern Holy Trinity, which is Audemars Piguet. They did this. They pulled out from all the retailers proactively and made a D2C model. You tell me, did it have any effect on sales, reputation, and demand?
Well, I still haven't got one. So,
It says it all.
Okay.
Says it all, doesn't it? And this is maybe an interesting question for our dear listeners. What would you, boys and girls, want? What would you like? Where do you think brands should go? Are they heading the right direction? Or are they losing sight of what the collectors and buyers want?
We should ask the chatbot that as well.
Yeah. So food for thought. And in 2024, we're going to come back on this topic then, aren't we?
Yeah. And I think just to close out my thoughts on this mini series was I started out doing this just as, I don't want to say like it was a novelty, but it was just something like, hey, let's do this. Let's try and be first and let's see where it goes. But I was really impressed by the initial results. And I was a little bit surprised when I heard you two agreeing so much with what was output. And so to me, what this says is that it's not perfect. It might not be for a while, but I think it's going to get there a lot faster than we think. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how we can integrate some of these tools more into the real-time show going forward.
I'm not sure I'm surprised that we are largely in agreement with its sensible answers. I think that makes sense. I think like a lot of our opinions are formed of the aggregate sense that is out there in the ether. I think it lacks a lot of nuance. It lacks a lot of creativity at the moment. It isn't quite able to suggest things that are mind-blowing. And I guess that's why there's so much, at least partial agreement with all of these points. But what it does do very, very well is start conversations at the right point, an advanced point. I mean, I always believe, or thus far have believed, because it's a very new technology, that a human should always give whatever an AI bot or generator puts out a final pass to make it human, to make sure that it's right, and to tweak it so that it goes from being a very good accumulation of facts and sensible opinions to being insightful and lateral thinking and everything that a traditionally formed human opinion or projection should be as well. One thing that we haven't spoken about, and I want to talk about because I think it's really fun, are the crazy bullshit predictions that ChatBot spat out. David, could you go through each of these one by one? So each dark horse prediction that gave us a ridiculous answer, and then Alan and I will quickly give our opinion on whether it is actually bullshit or potentially hot shit, and then you can give yours, and then we'll do all of them just to see, because there's some funny ones, right?
Okay, so my comment on this in the last episode was it looks like ChatGPT either mistook Rolex for Hublot or was using that website as a baseline for its answers. So I guess, Rob, do you want me to just read them all out, or just want me, or do we give our quick thoughts on them as I read them out?
One by one, please, so we're really focused.
All right, so let's start with the first one, Rolex entering the smartwatch market.
Yeah, that's bullshit. I think that'll never happen. Could I see a smart buckle? Boop. Maybe. I don't want to. I don't think the Rolex customer demands it, desires it. Rolex would probably just fall off their chair laughing at that one if it was brought up in a board meeting. Alon, are you in accord?
100%, because the trajectory for smartwatches is smaller, 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 injectable into our brain Neuralink. So soon we won't have smartwatches physically on the outside of our bodies. So what are you going to brag with or flaunt with or flex with, right? Rolex watches.
Christ, that's terrifying. All right, David, what do you think? And then the next one.
Yeah, I mean, this actually, I joke it came from Hublot's playbook, but Hublot has done this. A couple of other luxury brands have done this. I don't think Rolex will do it. So I think hallucination completely. Number two, sort of in that same vein, collaborations with high-profile tech brands. Now, I think of Apple and Hermes. When I think about this, I will give my thoughts since I'm talking now and turn it over to you two. Also, don't think this is going to happen because any like Apple is a luxury brand and Rolex is a luxury brand. I don't think they would want, and I think they're all about mechanics. So I don't think this is in the cards for them. What do you both think?
No way. It won't happen. If we want to talk about tech companies, it's maybe on collab aesthetics, or think of Facebook on a Tudor dial, right? Something like that. Or like they made watches for Domino. But that's not a real collab, is it? Those are promotional gifts. So, no, I don't think so. I don't think Rolex needs the halo effect from another brand. And that's the biggest reason why people do collabs. And I don't see the aura of the Rolex brand, the mighty Rolex, diminishing the next 1 or 2 decades. So no, call bullshit.
Yeah, it's bullshit topped with horse shit and smattered with goat shit. That one, definitely not. Sorry, it's not impossible to imagine it, but I've imagined a man eating his own head. So you can do a lot if you think hard enough, but it doesn't mean it's likely to happen. Next one, David. After your opinion on that.
All right, number three. Not totally out there, but I think just the bot lacks context here. Retro revival of discontinued models. So it actually mentions, think along the lines of a revamped Rolex Submariner 6538. That's the big crown. I think we know that's not going to happen. It's not Rolex's style. That's what they have Tudor for. Yeah, it's just not what they do.
Well. We have,
okay, all right.
We have reached our first...
Set me straight.
No, I'm not going to set you straight, but we've reached our first point of disagreement here on this, on the bullshit list. This I don't think should be discounted quite so lightly, and not because I think the Rolex Submariner 6538 will come back, although, to be quite frank, I wish it would. You're totally right. Tudor has kind of taken that in a different direction and done wonderful things with it. But what about when it comes to their dressier line? I mean, we're seeing them look backwards already. There's nothing to say that there won't be more watches of that ilk that come back from the past, like an early Oyster Perpetual in a cushion-shaped case, for example. That could be a model that might return. That I really could believe that. It's not a million miles away from their 1905 they call it, or do they call it the 1912? I can't remember.
1908, I think.
Oh, God, bloody hell, I was nowhere near. All right, 1908, that one. That's a good example, right? The Cellini line is ripe for experimentation. And a moon phase. Rolex will, at some point, bring out another complication. There is no longer a moon phase in the catalog, right? Didn't the old Cellini moon phase go?
It did.
Yep.
Right. Now, that's technology they have already, which means that there's likely going to be a revival of it. I would love to see, what I would love to see, and I would think that it would be an absolute home run, is the pre-Daytona Cosmograph. That's what I want back.
And it will happen, because look at the 100th anniversary of Le Mans. What sub-dials did they make? Hint, hint, hint. And now I'm going to make a bold statement. I'm willing to put a wager on it. Within a decade, we'll see the Prince come back. Rectangular Rolexes. Imagine that. So I'm with Rob 100%. And what do I always say, Rob? It's not revolution, but
Evolution.
All right. Okay.
That's Rolex's tagline. You heard it first at TRTS.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. You heard it here first. And I would love some of those square Cellinis to come back. I don't currently own one, but beautiful stuff.
Fuck the squares. I want a Midas.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I guess you can get a Ventura if you're to tide you over for an Elvis watch in the meantime. But
had to.
Yeah, the Midas.
Until then, put your name under my name on the waiting list for the Chan Toledano.
Good tip. Yeah, good shout out. Alon, just tell everybody what that is if they haven't heard of it just yet.
Our dear friend Phil Toledano, Mr. Enthusiast, based in New York. Crazy artist, crazy guy, cool guy, is building his own interpretation of the Midas, the integrated bracelet. He calls it brutalist architecture. Super cool. I believe the first pieces will be either with a real lapis lazuli dial or let me think, either meteorite or concrete, or the box is concrete. Anyways, go check it out on Instagram. It's Mr. Enthusiast, and I believe they have a handle up and running for the brand Chan and Toledano. Have a look. It's cool.
Cool. Well, I don't know if you did that on purpose, Alon, but number 4 is Rolex venturing into new materials. So not concrete, but this actually lists titanium, carbon fiber, or even recycled materials. I suppose it could have said ceramic. My take is it's partly right. I mean, titanium was showed up recently. My personal view is I don't think we're going to see ceramic or carbon fiber, but yeah, partially right on this one.
It is right. It's not shocking. The moment they did the first titanium, it was with that extreme deep sea-ish thing with RLX titanium, they call it. It will happen. And you see that Baby Tudor is the testing ground, the sandbox, their GitHub, they test everything. And it will happen. I mean, they already use ceramic in their bezels. They've been experimenting with crazy dials. I mean, back in the 50s, 60s, you've seen wooden dials, all types of stones. On my Insta, I saw one of my Grail Rolexes, a Platinum Day Date, with a beautiful Peu d'Ange, baby pink reddish coral dial. Wow, mamma mia, no numbers on the dial. That is high on my wish list.
Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not surprised it's high on your wish list. There's some lovely stuff in the past, absolutely. Yeah, I think that the question sounds more sensational than it is, absolutely. I mean, we have some titanium Rolexes already. Like Alon said, ceramic is in the bezels. They've always been pretty happy to use stones in the dial, and long may that continue, because I love that. I love an old day date with stone dial. You know, an onyx one is obviously a classic. Things like coral or malachite. I'd love to see some gold stone in there. I know it's man-made, but it's beautiful. Aventurine, why not? Everybody does it, and it's a perfect, even if it's artificial aventurine glass, totally fine. Tiger's eye, you know, you could have a lot of fun. Dinosaur bone, I could source Rolex some dinosaur bone if they need it, so get in touch, Rolex. I know you won't. By the way, Phil's brand is Toledano and Chan, not Chan and Toledano. So the handle is TOLEDANOANDCHAN. You can follow them on Instagram. There's only 5 posts, but they are tantalizing posts. I must say, I saw them when they came out, and now I'm looking at them again, especially with that concrete box and realizing how it connects with the case and the links. I might end up a customer of theirs. All right, next one on the list, David. We're getting through the BS list. Where are we up to now?
Okay, so we are now halfway through. Number 5 is the launch of a subscription or rental service. So it's exactly what it sounds like. ChatBot says, in an unexpected twist, Rolex might explore a subscription or rental service for their watches. This would be a radical shift from their traditional sales model, but could tap into a new market segment that prefers flexibility over ownership. No. Hard no. What do you both think?
That happens, hell has frozen over. The Messiah is coming then.
Yeah, run to the hills. There's no escape. That is the end of days. No, this is the worst of all of them. Not only did Breitling try this, you'll remember that little attempt by Breitling to tap into this market that they tried to convince us was the future for about 3 weeks before they realized it was a terrible idea. No.
Okay. All right. So unanimous there. Okay, number 6.
Hang on a second, right? Okay, I'm not saying that the idea in itself is so preposterous that it can't be raised, but we've literally got real world example of this not having worked.
Yeah,
the Breitling, whatever it was called. Like I wrote an article on it when it came out. I can't even remember what it was called. I don't know, where share to where, whatever. It was nothing like that, but something useless. Like it just didn't get any traction whatsoever. It doesn't really benefit a brand in the way that you can make an argument for if you just accept that you've not thought it through to the very end. It's not what watchers are there for. So no, sorry.
Hell yes. If they become transactional on Rolex.com. So if that happens, and it will happen one day, that day is far in the future. And in that future, where everybody has its own chatbot running, personalized, and if you're interested into the topic of AI and chatbots, I highly recommend the podcast episode between Lex Friedman and George Hotz, because he runs Tiny Corp, and his vision of the future is that everybody has a desktop-sized file server or a server running at home with its own chatbot or AI. And in that future, cryptocurrencies are definitely there not to stay, but dominate the financial markets. So my answer, hell yes.
Okay, this is good. Obviously, it was worth addressing these points because I'm kind of in between the two of you. I just caveat it by saying if we answer the question for today or the immediate future, I really can't see it. Like, firstly, I agree with David that I think the perception of cryptocurrencies is at its lowest right now. The confidence in them seems to be receding. I know it's all relative.
Bullshit.
Well, okay. Well, bear with me. Is it bullshit though?
Yeah, because crypto is on the rise right now.
But again, right? But let's face it. In the last 5 years, it's nowhere near the high point right now, is it?
5 years, dude. In what twilight zone do you live? The crypto winter started only a year plus ago. We had the all-time high, low. But don't you remember the dollar or the yen devaluating by 3/4 in any currency? So I'm not saying Dogecoin, but cryptocurrencies will be there. Mark my words.
Yeah, no, wait. Okay, let's not get distracted by what I said. I didn't say cryptocurrencies won't be there. Cryptocurrencies will be there. I was in the first part of my answer, and I was in the long future. Yes, firstly, you're right. Rolex have to be online for it to make sense. Yes, you're probably right. Crypto, even if it's in a completely different form than it is today, will almost certainly one day have a big role in transactions online. But I'm saying right now in this moment, depending on when we answer the question, confidence is not as high in crypto as it has been in the last 5 years at some other point. Am I wrong?
I think for me, it's not so much the financial aspect. It's a perception. Like if you look at, oh gosh, this is such a tangent, but like the perception, I think, of Rolex now has maybe not been helped by a lot of the quote crypto bros and the hype around them. And I just don't think that at this day, Rolex would want to add to that perception by getting involved directly in cryptocurrency. Setting aside the financial, the practical aspects, I just think there's a real perception issue with it at the moment.
Yeah, it's absolutely what my answer is based on. But I want Alan's opinion on that, because if he's saying to me that we're now at the apex of global perception of the validity and safeness of crypto as a transactional medium, I don't know what I'm reading or what I'm hearing that's not the case. I mean, as far as I'm aware, crypto has had a bit of a rough time of it over the last 18, 24 months.
It did. It's definitely not at an apex. I'm not saying that. The haters are saying crypto is dead in the water and will never come back. It will never dominate. So on the hypothesis, if cryptos will still exist in a few years, my answer is yes. And then a more bold statement, will it dominate financial markets? I obviously just said yes. Apex? No. I really believe Bitcoin will go to 100K, even maybe $250,000 per coin. So we'll have a shakeout. We'll see maybe 90% of those 10,000 ICOs, those coins that are out there, will perish, but it will be there. But to go back to the suggestion that our bot made, if Rolex will embrace cryptocurrency, they will. And I need to double check, but I believe Bucher already accepts Bitcoin payments. So if that's the case, and if my assumption is right, Rolex now already officially accepts Bitcoins. Think about that.
Now
Interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And LVMH already accepts it across the board of all the brands, e-com and in-store. Even my dear friend Raphael Goebelin, who is an amazing person and jeweler, but he's not modern, although that's not true. He's very modern on blockchain for his gemstone side of business. But their Goebelin.com website recently also started accepting cryptocurrencies. And you know what? One of the leaders in the world on crypto and DeFi is Switzerland. So not that weird.
Okay. That's why I love talking to you too, because I thought these were all BS, and it turns out it's less BS than I thought. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to move to number 7, which is interesting. Introduction of an entry-level line. Rolex could introduce an entry-level line of watches positioned slightly below their current offerings. This would be a strategy to capture a broader market, especially targeting our professionals. It's not outrageous, but I think they have that. It's the perpetual line. And those went crazy because they were so affordable, quote unquote, at MSRP. So not unreasonable, but I think it already exists. What do you both think?
So you're right. But if the bot means they'll produce a line that's even lower in price, think about Tudor price range or below Tudor. I don't think so. Hell no. Will not happen for years to come unless there is a new quartz crisis, and they'll do what Omega did, which cost them dearly, and Rolex actually never did. They never went down in price. They came up with this idea and created Tudor for this sole reason. But Rolex will never do it. There's only one way, and that's up. I don't see Rolex diminishing prices in the coming 5 decades, and definitely not create a product that's lower in price. So hell no.
Well, yeah, the question from ChatBot is like a bit weird, isn't it? Because they have done it already with Tudor. I guess they're asking, will they do it again as Rolex continues to climb and Tudor continues to climb? It's interesting to assess what the chatbot actually thinks it's saying, because does it mean Rolex will put a line in between Tudor and Rolex, or will it put one below Tudor? I think it's probably suggesting the latter, that there'll be like a 500 to 2,000 euro bracket that Rolex makes its competitor to Hamilton within. It seems unlikely, but here's a funny wrinkle, which is slightly tongue-in-cheek. I haven't completely lost my marbles. But what if Tudor did it? What if Tudor did what Rolex did, and it was pushed like, rather than the crown and the shield, we take the rose from Tudor, its old logo, and push that down into a new brand that can compete with Hamilton and Longines, as Longines escapes that bracket as well. Because Swatch Group is clearing out some of that market. And from my perspective, for someone that works in brand development at this moment, there is a massive hole in that market to be exploited. The worst price point to be in now is around 6,000. Anything from like 2 to 8,000, anything from 2 to 10 is really suffering right now, because it's so competitive and the confidence has dropped out of the secondary market in the last 18 months drastically, especially in the last 6 months. Is bizarre and it's terrifying. It's bad if you want to sell your watches. It's quite good if you want to buy watches you've had your eye on for a long time, but previously thought they were way too overvalued. So now we're in a situation where there is actually a good economic reason to have a brand operating at a price point even slightly below Tudor's. Because if I were the guys in Tudor, I'd clean house a little bit and get rid of a lot of their entry-level models, step up the prices a little bit more to be around the, let's say, 3.5 to 7 bracket, because Tudor's going to be fine, because unlike a lot of other brands, smaller brands in those price points, they have Rolex backing them up. And then you put in the Rose right at the bottom. I don't know what you'd call it, but yeah, what do you think about that?
I think we're saying this a lot, but you heard it here first on the Real Time Show. And I think this is a great example of AI setting you one direction and then the human element being added on top of that to come up with a new concept. So I think it's a valid thing to discuss if that were an idea that someone at Tudor wanted to talk about. But I think just, again, in the AI space, super interesting example of one output leading to a very valid suggestion from a human.
I just wanted to respond to that. Interesting idea, Rob. Don't see it. But what is interesting, and we discussed it in the previous episode, what will happen to Karl F. Bucher? So I believe they'll keep Tudor where it is. Karl F. Bucher, I believe, is a bit higher in price point, and they maybe will position it in between. A very interesting point you made, if they would create that, what you said.
I mean, Karl F. Bucher has got prices over quite a broad bracket. It's got some very experimental pieces that are more expensive than I think any Rolex in the standard catalog. And it does like to experiment with its technology. So right now it's a bit all over the place. My feeling with Karl F. Bucher is, because to me, there's not really a huge gap between Rolex and Tudor in terms of entry level, or let's just say median price. You've got Tudors around the 5K mark. You've got your entry level Rolexes like your Oyster Perpetuals, not much above that at all. And then you've got your bread and butter Submariners only at 8. So there isn't really much of a window, and it's the worst possible window to try and exploit at this point for a brand like Karl F. Bucher. So for my money, Karl F. Bucher will probably be pushed even higher, and it'll become the experimental, more jewelry focused line within the Rolex triumvirate as it is now. Many interesting topics raised by the chatbot. Let's wrap up this episode here because we could go on indefinitely by the sounds of things. It has been a wonderful experience, David, really eye-opening and stimulating. And I think the fact that it took us 2 shows to conduct an analysis that didn't even address every single point of interest raised in the article is proof that this is something we should run with. So thank you for that.
Thank you guys for letting me try it out. Always love being given free reign in the sandbox, we'll say.
I hope that you go back to the sandbox soon and retrain that bot to see what it comes up with next time. If you would like to ask the bot any questions, or any of us old-fashioned humans, you can do so by contacting us on Instagram, either at RobNuds, ROBNUDDS, at Alon Ben Joseph, ALONBENJOSEPH, or at DAVAUCHER for David Vaucher. Alon and I have email addresses, either Rob or Alon at therealtime.show. You can contact us on our dedicated Instagram handle, therealtime.show, or via the contact form on the website, www.therealtime.show. Please like, subscribe, follow the podcast, share it with your friends, tell them this is where new ideas come to life, because as David has proven once again, that is true. We'll be back next time with more top quality watch content. Until then, stay safe and keep on ticking.